'Cause you've got personality. Walk with personality. Talk with personality. Smile with personality.
Well, I always try to switch up the music to intro these podcasts, but for my next guest, I picked it day one and I had her on my show, and I just want to have it over and over, this song, introduce her. So, Jami Kirkbride, the Personality Mom, welcome back to this podcast, Keeping It with Alex Garrett.
Thank you, and I love the music too.
So, I know it's been a tough stretch for you, and I don't know if you want to weigh in on it, personal life and whatnot, but Valentine's Day is coming up, and trust me, I know, because my mom and my dad were there from the very beginning when I had needs that had to be met and born with one leg. I know what that's like when a parent's love is tested at a very early age. And Jami, it's Valentine's Day, and why don't we start there? I mean, the love you have for all your kids is great, but I know for one, you know, it was put to the test because he had some issues growing when he was younger and now recently. I don't know if you want to weigh in on it, but it's an interesting story that you told me off the air and his recovery.
Sure, yes. Actually, Alex, we are just on the other side of a second skull surgery for our little one. He was diagnosed with craniosynostosis, and his skull was basically fused shut, not allowing his brain the space that it needed to grow. So at 10 months, and then again just recently as he turned 5, they were doing repair work. The first surgery to open up his skull in hopes that it would then grow closed and allow his brain space, and then finding out at 5 that it had not grown that protective bone back, and so then basically having to make a 3D cover for his brain. So yeah, we've had kind of a tough stretch, but things are going well now, and I sat just this morning helping him write his little Valentines for all of his friends. So
well, tell me about that.
Special.
Obviously, it's coming up, and you have 8 kids, and they've all gone through the Valentine's Day magic, you know, getting one, giving one. Any advice for new parents or parents in general? Well, how do you celebrate Valentine's Day with your kids?
You bet. You know, we try to do some special things. We have 7 kids and then one that's actually been married into our family now. And so we always try to make Valentine's Day kind of special. Obviously, my husband and I have our, you know, ways that we celebrate by a date or cards and gifts. But every Valentine's Day, I've tried to make a point of giving a small box of chocolates and a special T-shirt or a devotion book to our kids. And that way they kind of figure out that the holiday and love and celebration of love includes them. And it's kind of a family affair, not necessarily just romantic love. And so we really try to focus on growing love as a family.
Do you feel like there's so much pressure at Valentine's Day that doesn't even need to be there? Because I think as we all get, you know, more mature and more older, it's not about the gift so much as it's about being there for your loved one, and not just Valentine's Day, but every day of the year.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I mentioned that we were just doing Valentine cards with my 5-year-old this morning, and I think it's a great kind of a representation of maybe what we feel with Valentine's Day sometimes. You know, they see the Valentines in the store, and it seems so fun to pass those out to their friends and, you know, give candy and all this. And then you sit down to do the Valentines, and oh my goodness, if that isn't a stressful event. And they realize they have to write each one of their friends' names and then write their own. And for those that are just learning to write, that can be an arduous task. And oftentimes in doing something that they thought would be fun, they end up shedding tears. And, you know, I think that's kind of representative of love. You know, love can look fun and sound fun, but it takes a little bit of work, and it takes some effort, and it takes some trying and, you know, drying the tears and getting back in there and trying again. And so I think that's actually a pretty good representation of love in real life.
And oftentimes, I know that there are also people that hate being single on Valentine's Day. Obviously, most of your life now, you've been with loved ones around you. So for those who might need a little encouragement around this time of year with Valentine's Day and with winter still here, what's your advice for those that are, you know, not with a partner right now.
Absolutely. I don't think that the focus needs to be a romantic love. I think if we look around us, we can spot all kinds of people that need to be blessed or that need love in their lives. And so maybe if we're feeling like, gosh, I'm one of those people that aren't attached, or I don't have someone naturally that I would maybe extend love to on this special day, I'm going to find that person, whether it's somebody in church, maybe it's a child in the community, maybe it's somebody at an older folks' home, maybe it's a neighbor down the street. That I think a broader scope perspective of love is really important. And looking for those small ways you can bless them. Maybe it's a handwritten note. Maybe it's just going and giving your time to somebody. Some of those gestures of love are inexpensive, and they don't necessarily take a lot of time, but they communicate a really deep message of love and care to others.
And I think, honestly, it's a little daunting because everybody's in their phone and whatnot, but
right.
no, and you look out in the streets, like when someone looks up at me from their phone and gives a smile, that means a lot because, my girlfriend's not next to me or my parents are next to me, but at least someone out there, other than close family, thinks enough to look up and say hi. I think that's meaningful in today's technological world.
Absolutely. I agree with that. It kind of makes you want to send them a message if you just knew their number, right?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And that's the reason why we clicked at the National Publicity Summit, is because you had this energy, you had this willingness, you had the icon, you had everything going that said, I want to stay connected. And okay. I really do feel like, sorry about that, I feel like every Valentine's Day, every year, it's like we're getting separated by our phones, and clearly with eight kids, 7, and then 1 in marriage, you can't be on the phone because you've got all your family, and so I think even people who may not have that extended family should be off their phone as well this time of year.
That's right. I think if we put our phones down, we find meaningful ways that we can connect and relate. And I think in those ways we end up finding friendships or connections, such as the one that you and I found from New York to Wyoming, that we can keep alive. And we don't have to see them all the time. We just know we can pick up the phone, we can shoot an email, we can shoot a text message. And in those moments, we catch up with each other. And I think we totally underestimate the value of just setting down our phone and finding ways to just send a blessing into someone's day.
And that leads me to my next question. God is there. He does exist. And I know that we share that also in common, the belief in him.
Right.
If there are people that are not, with someone or whatnot, maybe thinking about how God has them on the earth for a reason is a Valentine's Day gift in and of itself, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I think that's true. I think we were all created with a purpose, and I think we were all created with love behind that. And so I think, finding our purpose, finding the plan, finding why does he have me here kind of keeps us central to being in God's presence. And I don't think you can be in God's presence and not feel loved.
I totally agree, and I think that why we're in sort of a darkness period right now is because more people are veering away from that light and thinking it's all about themselves. I was talking last week because I just lost my grandmother, Mal, a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And she was 89, and she's now no longer suffering, so I'm thankful for that. I think God takes people home when he wants them back there. I just have started to develop that idea as I've seen the elders pass on before me. But I was saying a lot of people today want to know about their legacy, but really it has to be about the legacy of those gone before us. The love that they showed us, we have to exude that in our everyday lives.
Right. Exactly. I think sometimes we find our own purpose by maybe observing what some of the people around us and their purpose has been. How did they give to people in their world? How did they extend God's love to others? How did they extend God's love to me? And I think sometimes when we look and we watch those people that have mattered in our lives, I think of my grandma, as you mentioned yours. She had such a positive outlook. Her thing was always, tomorrow's a new day, and you can make more fun new friends tomorrow. And I think we take bits and pieces of those things that are passed down from legacy, and they become things that we can continue to pass down.
And I'm sure you're doing that, and the kid and your kids saw from their grandmother, love and whatnot. So with that being said, I know that you have a big family, and how do you And for the adults in the room, I guess you'd say, how do you and your husband stay passionate to keep the spark flying with with a big household that you take care of?
Absolutely. I would say, first of all, it's important in parenting that you keep the parent relationship a priority. It's so easy with busy schedules, kids' activities, sports schedules, school things, extracurricular activities, even just the tasks of parenting and discipline and daily needs. It's so easy to think, well, whatever time we have left, we'll see what we can do. And I have found over the years that it's in those stretches where we are purposeful about setting aside maybe, an hour or two weekly, or maybe it's 15, 20 minutes at the end of every day, deciding how can we reconnect? How can we catch up on what's happening, but not just do details? How can we go deeper? I know for a lot of people, they have a lot of success with weekly date nights. We struggle to pull that off, but, maybe even shoot for once a month, but find something that can keep that a purposeful priority. And then I think just making that investment each day to catch up and know what's going on in each other's lives. They say the best gift you can give a child is to love your spouse. And so I think it's so key and so important that we don't forget that. It's easy to kind of skip over that and be like, oh, I need to be everything my kids need. But they need you to have that secure marriage. They need you to have, be able to model love.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. So did you ever find your kids, as they were growing up, say, even on Valentine's Day, hey, I've seen how precious the love is between my mom and dad, and I want to do that as well? Like, did they ever mention to their friends when they were younger, oh, look at my mom and dad, they love each other so much? They ever have those kind of conversations?
I hope they are, Alex. I know we've embarrassed them a time or two with a little bit of public displays of affection, whether it's a hug or a kiss, and then being like, oh, my parents are always like that. And we just laugh and we say, we hope that that love is important, love is key, and we hope that you'll take that with you into your marriages. And
the other thing is that I can't not ask about this, but there's a political specter over everybody's head every day, and I hope that doesn't ruin Valentine's Day for anybody. But how do we just check out of all that and really make time for those that we love?
I think it kind of goes back to putting down our devices. Closing the computer, laptop, and getting off the phones, it surrounds us everywhere. And I think it's another thing we have to be very intentional about, that we say, you know what, we need that time that we disconnect, that we unplug, and we plug into those things that are lasting, things that are eternal, things that we can relate with, things that we can invest in. And I don't think that we find that so much on social media. I think we find that in face-to-face communication, in relationships, and in really understanding each other.
And for you personally, I don't know if you get into politics in your household or not, but I also think when the time is right, those conversations are important to have as well. That is a form of love, because if you have those conversations, you're not just shutting out the world around her, and you're not shutting down other people's views, which is also important. We're shutting everybody else's views down all around us, which is not healthy on a week such as Valentine's Day, especially.
I think that's true. I think when we love our child, when we love our spouse, when we love our neighbor, when we even love somebody that maybe has different political views, we understand their strengths, we understand maybe the struggles of their position, and we understand what do they really need from me in this conversation. And sometimes it's not agreement. Sometimes it's just to understand their point of view, even though yours differs. And so I think that's a respect and an understanding that we need to work to kind of extend to others. We don't have to engage in conversations only if we agree, and we don't have to walk away from conversations in agreement. We can walk away and say, that's an interesting perspective, and you may feel totally different, but still keep that respect for them as a person, and that they have their own position.
And that's important. Now, do your kids often talk about what they see or what's being talked about at school, I feel like it's on people's minds, even the little ones these days.
Yeah, they do. I would say even our grade school students will come home and talk about things that have been in the news or things that maybe a classmate referred to. And, sometimes it's questions, tell me more, what does impeachment mean? Or, sometimes they want us to define something. Sometimes it's like, well, why would somebody do this? Or why would somebody not do that? Or, the conversations we have at our dinner table are pretty interesting. And, we may not always agree, but we have some great conversations.
That's important, and I hope that you guys are inspired listening to this to keep on having conversations, because it's not a cliche anymore. You see people at dinner, they're literally with their phones in their hand and not talking to anybody. That's a real thing. That's not even sensationalized by the media.
That's right. At our house, we have a no phones at the table rule. And when we go out to eat, it's no phones out of your pocket. And our kids are accustomed to it, and they stick by it. And it was kind of funny, Alex, but our kids had gone on a school sports activity trip, and the whole team was traveling together. And I heard later from parents that the boys had said, hey, everybody put your phone in the middle of the table, and no one moves it till the meal's done. So it was in, kind of a silly, fun way they could impart to their friends, hey, let's connect, let's talk, let's save that for later.
Well, and not only that, Jami, it shows that they're listening to you guys, which is even more important.
Well, thanks. I hope those messages will be lasting.
And I just think that we're coming into this week, which should be like filled with actually a lot of excitement. It's a 4-day weekend because we have President's Day off, so that's a huge thing too.
Right.
And yet we're coming to this week and people are still battling each other, and it's just like, how, from your shoes, from the personality mom, Jami Kirkbride, how can we put away all that vitriol? And also, why can't we continue the loving air beyond one day? Like, what is it in our human nature that prevents us from doing that?
I think there is in each of us this innate sense of I want to be right. I want to know that the track I'm on is the right track. And in some ways there is one track, but in other ways there's perspectives that we just need to kind of take into account. And I think personality actually allows that. It allows us to see if we're visiting with someone and they are very staunch in their perspective and they are very loud in their approach, maybe understanding, you know what, this isn't about me, this isn't about my perspective, but that personality feels very strongly about things and they communicate it strongly. You might have another personality that is all about being right. And so maybe they have a lot of facts and details, and no matter what you say, they try to come back at you with details that kind of refute your stance. And maybe instead of fighting that or thinking it's against you, maybe having that grace to say, you know what, their personality is all about the details. Like, they have analyzed this situation forwards and backwards, and we can still disagree. But it doesn't have to be a personal attack. And I think no matter what your personality is, realizing that those we deal with may very well have an opposite personality. And I think we just really need to work on extending grace and understanding.
And I truly believe that. Now, you have a very cheery voice, Jami, and it's every time I have you on, it's a pleasure to have you. But I've got to say, beyond that cheery voice, and with the time you've been in, how have you been able to keep love in your heart through all the stress you've been doing? How have you been guided through this whole process?
Well, thanks for your kind words. And you know what? It's a challenge. It's hard. I was telling somebody the other day, this last year we just came through was probably one of the toughest years of my life. And I've actually been through some pretty big and difficult things in my life. And I think the thing I just kept coming back to was trying to find joy. And Alex, you and I agree on this. Joy is found in being in God's presence, and it's not something we can find on our own. It's not something we can conjure up on our own. We can't work hard enough to be joyful. That joy is truly found in the love and the peace and the joy that God extends. And so I've really had to make a point of each day spending quiet time with God. There were days where I could read my Bible, I could study. There were days I listened to music. There were days I read some devotion books. And there were days where I just had to sit and just be in His presence, and maybe I didn't even have the words for what I was feeling. but just to be in his presence. And for me, that is where I find that refreshment. That's where I kept finding that ability to go the next day and the next day and the next day.
Well, and I hope, where can people, if they're inspired by this message, where can they come and find you for your blog? I know you do a big blog and you update it frequently, and I'm not sure if you've written about this latest journey you're on, but if you have, where can people find your wisdom and encouragement?
You bet. It's online. You can go to parentingwithpersonality.com, and you'll find my blog there. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter at PersonalityMom. So look me up in any of those places, and I always love to hear from people. So drop me a line, and I'd love to connect.
And we will definitely make sure that people know about that. And one more thing, any last piece of wisdom and encouragement that you've been holding back from us when it comes to Valentine's Day, when it comes to really gratitude and true love toward your loved ones?
You know, I think my closing thought would be this. It's important that we continue to extend love even if what we get in return isn't exactly what we want. That I think we can help set the tone if we be consistent in what we give others and not have the judgment be that their response has to match ours.
And I think if we don't have that expectation, I think that'll be helpful for us, because then we're not stressed about, well, why didn't we get anything back in return?
Yeah,
and
exactly. And it sounds easy, but it's kind of hard, you know, to put down our expectations and just give without any expectation in return. But you'll find that you are, you know, not so easily disappointed when you do put down those expectations.
And that comes to, you know, love. Love isn't about being narcissistic or egotistic. You know, love's about putting the ego away and not expecting something because you did something. It's about continuing to give and give and give and give.
I mean, that's right. And the truth is, relationships are hard. Marriages are hard. Parenting is hard. We go through tough seasons, and then we go through easier seasons. So no matter where you are, just extend the love that God gives you to extend and leave it at that.
Amen. Hey, Jami Kirkbride, thank you so much, and please keep us updated on your journey that you're having with your son. It sounds like a pretty traumatic event, but you guys are pulling through it, so keep us updated, and
thank you.
Whenever you got a thought you want to talk about, come back on, and we'll have you.
You bet. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot, Alex.
Thank you, Jami. I'm Alexander Garrett, and we will talk to you soon. That was so good, Jami.
Good. Well, you do